Beneath the quiet earth, history's greatest treasures are waiting to be rediscovered. We often walk past ancient cemeteries without a second thought, seeing them only as solemn places of final rest. But hidden within these sacred grounds are vaults of unimaginable wealth and forgotten stories that have reshaped our understanding of the past. Today, we are embarking on a global expedition to uncover 35 of the most astonishing treasures ever found in burial sites across the world. You will see golden masks that sparked archaeological feuds, armies of clay warriors built for the afterlife, and frozen tombs that preserved secrets for millennia. How did a single piece of Roman glass use technology we are only now beginning to understand? What could a collection of sunken skulls from the Stone Age possibly tell us about early human belief? By the end of this journey, you will possess a new perspective on the deep connections between death, memory, and the dazzling artistry of ancient civilizations. What forgotten story buried near your own home is still waiting to be told? Our first stop is a sun-baked hillside in Greece in the year 1876. The German businessman turned amateur archaeologist Heinrich Schliemann was convinced the epic poems of Homer were not just myths, but historical fact. Driven by a fanatical belief, he began digging at the ancient citadel of Mycenae, guided by descriptions from the Iliad. There, within a deep shaft grave, his team uncovered something that took their breath away. It was a mask of pure, beaten gold, pressed upon the face of a long-dead king. The features were strikingly detailed, a solemn face with a thin mustache, a short beard, and closed eyes that seemed to hold an ancient peace. In a moment of triumphant certainty, Schliemann sent a famous telegram declaring he had gazed upon the face of Agamemnon, the legendary king who led the Greeks against Troy. This object, now known as the Mask of Agamemnon, instantly became a global sensation and a potent symbol of a lost civilization's grandeur. It was tangible proof that the Mycenaeans, who thrived over 3,000 years ago, possessed incredible wealth and sophisticated artistry. The mask was not merely decorative. It was a statement of divine right and eternal power, meant to transform a mortal ruler into an immortal god in the afterlife. Yet, from the moment of its discovery, whispers of doubt began. The mask's stylized features and exquisite craftsmanship seemed almost too perfect, too distinct from other, more crudely made masks found in nearby graves. Some scholars argued Schliemann, known for his dramatic flair and desire for glory, might have had the artifact altered or even fabricated to fit his heroic narrative. The controversy has simmered for over a century, a debate that asks whether we are looking at the true face of a Bronze Age king or the idealized face of a legend that one man desperately wanted to be real. Regardless of its true origin, the mask's power is undeniable. It forced the world to reconsider a shadowy period of history, lifting the Mycenaeans from the realm of poetry into the light of archaeology. It stands as a breathtaking reminder of how a single object, lifted from the darkness of a tomb, can rewrite our entire understanding of the past. That golden mask revealed a single king's face, but what if an entire army was buried to guard one man for eternity? In the spring of 1974, farmers digging a well in a field near Xi'an, China, struck not water, but pottery. They had accidentally uncovered the edge of one of history's most staggering archaeological discoveries, the necropolis of Qin Shi Huang, the first emperor of China. This was not a simple burial mound, but a sprawling subterranean city of the dead, constructed over decades by hundreds of thousands of laborers. At its heart, waiting in silent formation across 3 massive pits, was a Terracotta Army of over 8,000 life-size soldiers, each one unique. This was not a symbolic gesture. It was a literal military garrison, frozen in time, created to protect the emperor's spirit in the afterlife. The sheer scale is almost impossible to comprehend until you stand at the edge of Pit 1 and gaze across the ranks. Row upon row of infantrymen, archers, cavalrymen, and charioteers stretch into the distance, their terracotta forms emerging from the earth like ghosts of a forgotten regiment. But the true wonder lies in the details. Look closer, and you see that no two faces are exactly alike. Each soldier possesses distinct features, hairstyles, expressions, and even ear shapes. Some look youthful and determined, others weathered and wise. Their armor is intricately detailed, from the rivets on their plates to the lacing on their boots. The horses, too, are masterpieces of realism, muscles taut and ready for battle. This was an army of individuals, a breathtaking artistic endeavor meant to mirror the very real, diverse forces that unified China for the first time. Excavation and restoration continue to this day, a painstaking puzzle where every fragment must be carefully catalogued and reassembled. Yet the greatest mystery remains completely untouched. The emperor's central tomb mound, described by ancient historians as a microcosm of his empire with rivers of mercury and a star-studded ceiling, lies undisturbed under a hill of earth. Advanced sensing technology has detected unusually high levels of mercury in the soil, suggesting the ancient tales might hold truth. But the tomb itself remains sealed, a final treasure chamber protected by booby traps and, perhaps, by the weight of history itself. The Terracotta Army forces us to confront the ultimate power of belief. The idea that a ruler could command, not just in life, but could take his very nation's strength with him into the dark. While the Terracotta Army guarded an emperor's spirit, another civilization believed their royalty should not journey to the afterlife alone. In the 1920s, the sands of southern Iraq yielded a discovery so lavish and so chilling, it redefined our understanding of human history's very first cities. Archaeologist Leonard Woolley was excavating the ancient Sumerian city of Ur, a place already legendary as the possible birthplace of the biblical Abraham. What he uncovered, however, was not a simple settlement, but a royal cemetery dating back over 4,500 years. The tombs were not just burial chambers. They were scenes of breathtaking opulence and profound solemnity. The most staggering find was what Woolley termed the Great Death Pit. This was not a tomb for a single ruler, but a rectangular chamber where a king or queen was accompanied in death by a full retinue of their court. Dozens of attendants, soldiers, musicians, and oxen-drawn chariots were laid to rest alongside them, not victims of violence, but participants in a carefully orchestrated ritual. They had taken a ceremonial drink and then lay down in orderly rows, choosing to follow their ruler into eternity, a practice that speaks to a belief system where service did not end with a heartbeat. The artifacts recovered from these tombs are masterpieces that bridge the gap between artifact and art. One of the most famous is the Standard of Ur, a hollow wooden box inlaid with a mosaic of shell, red limestone, and lapis lazuli. It tells a story in two panels, war and peace. One side shows chariots rolling over enemies and infantry in cloaks and helmets, a vivid narrative of Sumerian military might. The other side reveals the prosperity that victory brings, with banquets, musicians, and processions of people bringing tribute. This was not a flag or a banner, but likely a sound box for a musical instrument, meaning its stories were literally accompanied by music. Then there is the ram in a thicket, a stunning figurine of a goat standing on its hind legs, four legs braced against a golden tree. Its fleece is made of shell, its belly of silver, and its horns and the tree's flowers are pure gold. This delicate, lifelike sculpture, a symbol of vitality and perhaps of a deity, was found crushed flat by the weight of the soil, only to be painstakingly restored to its former glory. But perhaps the most personal treasure was found adorning Queen Puabi herself. Her skeleton was discovered with an elaborate headdress of gold leaves, golden ribbons, and enormous crescent-shaped earrings. A cape of polished gold and carnelian beads, thousands of them lay across her chest. This was not merely wealth displayed, it was identity preserved. Every element, from the specific flowers in her headdress to the quality of the lapis lazuli beads traded from distant Afghanistan, communicated her status, her connection to the gods, and the vast trade networks Sumer commanded. The treasures of Ur tell a complex story. They show a society already highly stratified, with rulers considered so. Divine their passage required a solemn sacrificial escort. They reveal artisans capable of breathtaking realism and narrative detail, working with materials sourced from across the known world. And they present a haunting duality, a culture that could create objects of such delicate beauty while upholding a ritual that seems so stark to us today. These tombs are a frozen moment, capturing not just the death of a queen, but the very soul of a civilization taking its first steps toward empire. The frozen silence of a tomb can sometimes preserve life in astonishing detail. Far to the east, in the high Altai mountains where Siberia meets Central Asia, the Scythian nomads built burial mounds called kurgans. These were not simple graves, but frozen time capsules sealed by a natural miracle, permafrost. For over 2,000 years, this permanently frozen ground acted as a perfect refrigerator, protecting materials that would have vanished anywhere else in the world. When archaeologists opened these tombs in the 20th century, they did not just find bones and metal, they found a lost world perfectly preserved. The most famous of these are the Pazyryk burials, and what they revealed turned our understanding of nomadic life upside down. Inside the wooden burial chambers, the bodies of chieftains were found with intricate, vivid tattoos still visible on their skin. These were not simple markings, but elaborate artistic compositions depicting mythical beasts like griffins and deer curling across shoulders and legs, a permanent storybook written on flesh. This alone shattered the Greco-Roman image of the Scythians as mere savage horsemen, revealing a complex society with deep spiritual beliefs and a rich artistic tradition. But the treasures did not stop there. Because of the permafrost, archaeologists recovered the world's oldest known pile carpet, its vibrant reds and intricate patterns still stunningly clear. They found a full-sized chariot disassembled and placed in the tomb for the afterlife journey, and they uncovered incredible goldwork. The Scythians mastered what is called the animal style, creating jewelry and adornments featuring twisted, dynamic scenes of combat between stags, panthers, and griffins. These were not static portraits, but explosions of motion captured in gold, meant to be worn and to clatter with the movement of a rider on horseback. This treasure hoard paints a picture radically different from the accounts written by their settled neighbors, the Greeks and Persians, who often described them as primitive. The frozen kurgans show us a people who were highly mobile, yet deeply artistic, who carried their entire culture on horseback, but invested immense wealth and care into the journey to the next world. They were masters of their harsh environment, using its very cold to defeat time itself, leaving behind not just gold, but the breath and color of their daily lives. Gold and permafrost preserved the Scythian nomads, but on the arid coast of Peru, another warrior priest king lay waiting in a tomb of mud brick, his treasures untouched for 1,700 years. In 1987, Peruvian archaeologist Walter Alva received a frantic call. Police had raided a small village called Sipan, seizing from looters a cache of ancient artifacts so magnificent they seemed impossible, solid gold masks and intricate silver ornaments. Alva knew this was not a random find. It was the tip of a royal iceberg. Rushing to the site, a crumbling adobe pyramid known as Huaca Rajada, his team began a careful excavation. What they uncovered was the first completely unlooted tomb of a Moche ruler, a civilization that dominated northern Peru centuries before the Inca. As they brushed away the dry soil, a staggering world of wealth emerged. The man, soon called the Lord of Sipan, was not simply buried. he was entombed in layers of sacred power. His body was encased in a suit of armor made entirely of small gilded copper plates, shimmering like fish scales. On his head rested a magnificent crescent-shaped headdress of gold, and covering his face was a mask of gold with eyes of lapis lazuli. His ears were adorned with large gold ornaments, and across his nose rested a breathtaking piece of art, a gold nose ornament the size of a human hand, depicting a miniature scene of a warrior priest holding a ceremonial Tumi knife. This was not jewelry for vanity. Every piece was a badge of office, a symbol of his divine role as a mediator between the human world and the gods. The tomb was a microcosm of his court in life. Buried with him were his closest companions and guardians, including a military commander, a flag bearer, several young women, likely weavers or attendants, and even 2 dogs and a llama, all sacrificed to accompany him. They were arranged in precise positions around his wooden coffin, a silent retinue for the afterlife. But the treasures did not stop with the Lord himself. In the following months, archaeologists discovered 2 more royal tombs within the same pyramid, one believed to be an earlier priest and another known as the Old Lord of Sipan. Each contained its own unique masterpieces of metallurgy. They found enormous ear spools of gold and turquoise, necklaces with pendants made from golden peanuts, and intricate rattles made of silver that would have chimed during ceremonies. The Moche were master metalsmiths, using techniques like soldering, plating, and alloying to create objects of breathtaking complexity and symbolic depth. The discovery at Sipan was a revelation. Before this, most knowledge of the Moche came from their vivid pottery, which depicted scenes of warfare, ritual, and mythology. The Lord of Sipan gave those 2-dimensional drawings a 3-dimensional reality. Here was the actual man who wore the regalia shown on the pots, the living embodiment of the rituals that governed Moche life. His tomb provided an undeniable link between art and authority, proving that the elaborate ceremonies, including the famous sacrifice ceremony, were performed by a real, powerful elite. This single unlooted chamber transformed the Moche from a mysterious, ancient culture into a tangible, sophisticated civilization with a complex social structure, profound spiritual beliefs, and artistic skills that rivaled any in the ancient world. The Moche lords ruled with gold and ceremony, but across the Atlantic, a very different kind of royal burial lay hidden beneath the quiet English countryside. In the summer of 1939, as the shadow of war fell over Europe, an archaeologist named Basil Brown made a discovery in Suffolk that would rewrite the history of Britain itself. He was excavating a series of mysterious grassy mounds known as Sutton Hoo, and beneath the largest mound, he did not find a stone chamber or a wooden coffin. Instead, his trowel revealed the ghostly imprint of an entire ship, 27 meters long, its wooden planks long since dissolved by the acidic soil, leaving only a perfect dark stain in the sand. This was not a grave. It was a monument. A king had been laid to rest in the heart of his ship, surrounded by a treasure trove meant to proclaim his power for all eternity. The riches placed within that spectral hull were nothing short of magnificent. The most iconic find is the Sutton Hoo helmet, a masterpiece of iron and bronze that is far more than armor. It is a face, a persona, a fierce iron mask with garnet eyes and gilded eyebrows, forms the visage, complete with a mustache and a nose that creates a dragon's head when viewed from the side. The crest of the helmet is decorated with intricate, interlocking warriors, a tiny army marching across the king's brow. This was not meant merely to protect in battle. It was designed to transform the wearer into a mythical, terrifying being, a leader of legend. Alongside it lay objects of staggering craftsmanship. A massive gold belt buckle, heavy and intricate, covered in swirling, abstract animal patterns that seemed to move in the light. A pair of shoulder clasps made of gold, garnet, and mosaic glass, designed to hold a cloak in place with a complexity that still stuns modern jewelers. There was feasting gear too, including silver bowls and spoons from the distant Byzantine Empire, proving this Anglo-Saxon king was connected to a vast network of trade that stretched to Constantinople. Before Sutton Hoo, this period in Britain was often called the Dark Ages, a time thought to be barren of culture after the Romans left. This ship burial illuminated that darkness like a lightning strike. The treasures spoke of a society that was sophisticated, wealthy, and deeply artistic, with skills in metalwork that rivaled any in Europe. Historians believe this was likely the final resting place of King Redwald of East Anglia, a ruler who lived around the year 625. What makes the burial so fascinating is its spiritual duality. The ship itself is a profoundly pagan symbol, a vessel for the journey to the afterlife, and many of the designs feature ancient Germanic animal motifs. Yet, among the grave goods were two small silver spoons, possibly christening spoons, engraved with the names Saul and Paul. This hints at a king and a kingdom, caught between two worlds, honoring the old gods while cautiously embracing the new Christian faith sweeping across the land. The Sutton Hoo ship burial does not just give us treasure, it gives us a portrait of a pivotal moment where an old world was passing away and a new one was being born, all commemorated and in the silent earth beneath a Suffolk field. The silent ship at Sutton Hoo revealed a king between two worlds, but one royal tomb would come to symbolize ancient treasure itself in the global imagination. In the stark, sun-bleached valley of the kings in Egypt, a story was unfolding that seemed straight out of a novel. For years, the British archaeologist Howard Carter had been searching, funded by his patron Lord Carnarvon, convinced that one pharaoh's tomb remained untouched by the looters who had emptied all the others. By the autumn of 1922, hope and money were nearly exhausted. Carter ordered a final dig beneath the ruins of some ancient workmen's huts. On November 4th, his team uncovered a stone step cut into the bedrock. It was the top of a staircase leading down into the dark. Weeks of careful excavation later, Carter stood before a sealed doorway. With trembling hands, he made a small hole in the ancient plaster. Lord Carnarvon, standing behind him, asked anxiously, "Can you see anything?" Carter, holding a candle to the opening, could barely form the words. "Yes," he whispered, "wonderful things." What lay beyond that door was a time capsule of unimaginable splendor, the intact tomb of the boy King Tutankhamun, who had ruled over 3,000 years before. For the first time, the world saw the true, staggering scale of a pharaoh's burial wealth, not through looted fragments, but in pristine, overwhelming totality. The antechamber was crammed with objects, a chaotic jumble of golden chariots, dismantled and stacked, gilded couches in the shape of exotic animals, alabaster vases, and ornate chests. It looked less like a curated tomb and more like a royal storage room, packed hastily after the young king's unexpected death. But the true wonders awaited in the burial chamber itself. There, within a series of golden shrines like nested Russian dolls, lay a stone sarcophagus. Inside it was the mummy of Tutankhamun, his head and shoulders covered by the single most iconic artifact from the ancient world, the solid gold death mask. Weighing over 22 pounds of pure hammered gold, the mask is a portrait of serene, idealized youth. The face is inlaid with stripes of lapis lazuli, the eyes made of obsidian and quartz, the ceremonial beard braided with gold. This was not a likeness meant for the living, but a divine vessel, transforming the mortal king into the god Osiris for his journey through the underworld. Another masterpiece was the golden throne, found in the antechamber. Its back is a stunning scene of the young king and his queen, Ankhesenamun, rendered in exquisite detail. He sits casually in a chair while she stands before him, anointing him with perfume. The scene is intimate, human, a glimpse of personal life amidst the overwhelming divine symbolism. The artifacts told a complete story of royal existence, from the practical, like his 6 magnificent chariots, to the symbolic, like the small gold coffins that held his preserved internal organs. Yet, the discovery was soon shrouded in a modern myth almost as powerful as the ancient ones. Lord Carnarvon died from an infected mosquito bite just months after the tomb was opened, and a series of other deaths among those connected to the excavation fueled sensational newspaper headlines about a pharaoh's curse. While the curse was a fabrication, it cemented Tutankhamun's place in popular culture, transforming an obscure minor pharaoh into the most famous Egyptian of all time. Scientifically, the impact was monumental. This single tomb provided an unparalleled, complete catalogue of 18th dynasty royal life, art, and religion. Every artifact, from the grandest statue to the most humble piece of linen, could be studied in its original context. It offered a blueprint that helped archaeologists understand what had been lost from the plundered tombs of greater pharaohs like Ramesses II. Tutankhamun's treasures did more than fill museum halls. They gave the world a tangible, breathtaking connection to a civilization that had always fascinated us, proving that sometimes the greatest historical truths are found not in the grandest monuments, but in the one small forgotten chamber that time left behind. The golden mask of Tutankhamun sought to transform a king into a god, but in ancient China, an entire aristocracy pursued a more tangible form of eternity. They believed a magical stone could cheat death itself. For the Han Dynasty elite, who ruled China for over 4 centuries starting around 206 BC, immortality was not just a spiritual hope, but a physical goal. Their chosen vessel for this impossible journey was jade. This luminous green stone was considered more precious than gold, a substance that could ward off evil spirits and, most importantly, preserve the physical body from decay. This profound belief culminated in the most extravagant burial practice of the age, the creation of jade burial suits. These were not mere shrouds or ornaments, but full-body armors of immortality, meticulously crafted to encase a noble person from head to toe. The discovery that proved these legends were real occurred in 1968 within the Mancheng Hills of Hebei province. Workers digging an air raid tunnel for the military stumbled upon a hidden complex of rock-cut tombs. Archaeologists identified them as the final resting places of Prince Liu Sheng, a son of the powerful Emperor Jing, and his wife, Do Wan. Their tombs, carved deep into the mountain, had remained sealed for over 2,000 years. Inside, the archaeologists found a sight that defied expectation. Each coffin contained a human-shaped form composed entirely of small, flat plaques of jade linked together. They had discovered 2 complete jade burial suits. Prince Liu Sheng's suit was assembled from 2,498 rectangular and square plaques of polished nephrite jade, each drilled with tiny holes at the corners. These plaques were fastened together with over 2 pounds of fine gold thread, woven through the holes to create a flexible metallic garment. His wife Do Wan's suit was similarly constructed, though slightly smaller, using 2,160 pieces of jade and over 1 pound of gold thread. The scale of labor involved is almost incomprehensible. A single suit represented a staggering investment of time, wealth, and specialized craft. First, the raw jade boulders had to be sourced, often from distant regions like Khotan, a journey of thousands of miles. Master craftsmen then painstakingly sawed, ground, and polished each individual plaque to a precise thickness and shape, ensuring they would lie flat against the body. The most delicate task was drilling the microscopic holes in each corner without shattering the brittle stone. Finally, master jewelers wove the threads of precious metal, creating a literal fabric of stone and gold. The type of thread used was dictated by the deceased's rank, a strict hierarchy set by imperial decree. Emperors and the highest royalty were entitled to suits sewn with gold thread. Lower-ranking princes, marquises, and their consorts used silver thread, while still lesser aristocrats could only use copper thread or silk. The suit itself was a public declaration of status, a final and immutable marker of one's place in the cosmic and social order. Yet, for all their breathtaking craftsmanship and profound symbolism, the jade suits ultimately failed in their primary purpose. When archaeologists carefully lifted the golden-threaded carapace from Prince Liu Sheng's coffin, they found only a few dusty bones and some teeth inside. The magical stone had not preserved the flesh. The Han dynasty's dream of physical immortality, woven with such hope and expense, was laid bare as dust. But in that failure lies a different kind of preservation. These suits survive as perhaps the ultimate expression of a civilization's desire to conquer time, a frozen moment of artistry, belief, and power that speaks far louder than the bones it was meant to protect. They are not tombs of a body, but monuments to an idea so powerful it commanded the wealth of an empire to be stitched together, piece by precious piece. Jade suits promised immortality through preservation, but the Vikings built their ships for a different kind of journey, one that embraced the sea as a final, glorious road. In the soft clay of the Norwegian fjords, 2 of these vessels were found, not as wrecks at the bottom of the ocean, but entombed within great earthen mounds, as if docked for the afterlife. The Oseberg ship, discovered in 1904, is a masterpiece of both naval engineering and artistic expression, built around the year 820. This sleek vessel is over 21 meters long, carved from oak and designed for speed in coastal waters. But what sets it apart is its breathtaking decoration. The entire ship is a riot of intricate wood carving, from its towering spiraled stem post to the rails along its sides. Every surface writhes with what scholars call the gripping beast style, an interlocking pattern of animal forms so stylized they seem to be both serpent and vine, a chaotic, energetic style meant to show power and prestige. This was not a warship, but a royal yacht, a ceremonial vessel for a person of immense importance, and the importance of that person was a revelation in itself. Within the ship's burial chamber lay the remains of 2 women. One, likely in her 70s or 80s, was buried with a wealth of goods that still stuns the imagination. There were 4 elaborately carved wooden sledges, a working cart with intricate wheels, and even a collection of bedposts shaped into animal heads. The textiles, preserved by the blue clay, included fine tapestries and elaborate clothing, showcasing a level of domestic wealth and artistry rarely associated with the Viking Age. The presence of a large ornate bucket made of yew wood, along with a wand, led to theories that the older woman may have been a vulva, a seeress or ritual priestess, a figure of tremendous spiritual authority. The Oseberg burial forces us to completely rethink the role of women in Viking society. This was not a mere companion, but a leader whose status warranted a send-off, rivaling any king's. Her power demonstrated not by weapons, but by control over the household, craft, and perhaps the gods themselves. Just a few miles away and a few decades later, the Gokstad ship presents a starkly different vision of Viking glory. Unearthed in 1880, this ship is larger, stronger, and built for the open ocean. It is a true warship and cargo vessel, capable of crossing the North Atlantic.
Buried within it, around the year 900, was a single man, a powerful chieftain in his 40s. His burial reflected his worldly role. He was laid to rest with his weapons, including swords and spears, and the skeletons of 12 horses and 6 dogs were placed around the ship, likely representing his hunting prowess and status.
3 smaller boats were also buried alongside the great ship, creating a small fleet for the afterlife. While the grave goods were less ornate than Oseberg's, they spoke of a life of action, warfare, and exploration. The Gokstad, Chieftain was a man of the wider world, his ship a tool for raid, trade, and discovery. Together, these two ship burials paint a complete portrait of Viking elite society. The Oseberg woman shows us the profound spiritual and economic power held within the home and the hall, celebrated with artistic splendor. The Gokstad man embodies the martial and exploratory drive that defined the Viking Age to outsiders. Both, however, shared the same profound belief that the ship was the perfect vehicle for the journey to the next world. It was a symbol of mobility, identity, and security, a trusted companion that could navigate not just the fjords of Norway, but the rivers of the underworld. These buried ships are more than tombs. They are time capsules of a culture's soul, preserving the wood, the tools, and the very vessels that carried a people to greatness, now carrying their rulers into legend. The Viking chieftain's ocean-ready ship spoke of a world reached by sea, but in the verdant valleys of southeastern Korea, a kingdom built its eternity from solid earth and gold. The ancient Silla kingdom, which ruled from around 57 BC to 935 AD, left behind a city of the dead in their capital, Gyeongju, that rivals any in the world. Scattered across the landscape are vast grass-covered mounds, looking like gentle, sleeping hills. But these are not natural formations. They are giant tombs called tumuli, built for Scylla's royalty. For centuries, they were considered untouchable, sacred monuments. Then, in the 1970s, archaeologists carefully opened one of the largest, known as the Heavenly Horse Tomb. What they found inside was a burial chamber of wood and stone, and within it, a king's treasure that revealed a kingdom at the crossroads of the world. The centerpiece was, and remains, one of the most breathtaking artifacts ever unearthed on the Korean peninsula, a Silla gold crown. This is not a simple circlet, but a delicate forest of upright gold bands, shaped like trees or antlers, rising from a thin gold headband. Dangling from these branches are dozens of shimmering spangles of jade, known as gogok, and tiny gold pendants that would have caught the light with every movement. The effect is not just regal, it is spiritual, as if the wearer was crowned with a sacred grove. The craftsmanship is astonishingly fine, with gold threads no thicker than a human hair used to create intricate patterns. Alongside the crown were other symbols of ultimate authority. A massive gold belt, its plaques decorated with the same tree motif, would have hung heavily from the king's waist, a literal weight of power. There were golden earrings of stunning complexity, bracelets and rings, all speaking of a society where gold was not just wealth, but the very medium of divine right. But the tomb's name comes from a more humble, yet equally revealing artifact. A painted birch bark saddle flap was found, depicting a white horse with wings, soaring amidst clouds. This heavenly horse motif connects Silla to the broader steppe traditions of Central Asia, a symbol of shamanistic power and the king's ability to travel between the earthly and spiritual realms. This is the key to understanding Scylla's treasures. The artistry is a unique fusion. The gold working techniques and the tree of life symbolism show influences from the nomadic cultures of the Eurasian steppes, likely traveling along trade routes. Yet, the use of the distinctive comma-shaped jade gogok is purely indigenous, a symbol of spiritual power dating back to Korea's prehistoric past. Silla was not an isolated kingdom, it was a vibrant hub on the far eastern end of the Silk Road network. Its wealth flowed from trade, exporting its superb gold work and iron, and importing ideas, artistic styles, and luxury goods from as far away as Persia and the Byzantine Empire. The royal tombs of Gyeongju are more than just graves, they are capsules of a sophisticated, cosmopolitan culture that mastered its own identity by weaving together the threads of a connected ancient world. They show us a king who was crowned not just with gold, but with the entire landscape of belief and commerce. his headdress reaching for heaven while his kingdom's roots drew nourishment from across the continent. These Korean kings were buried with crowns of gold, but in the shallow waters of a Swedish lake, an ancient community left behind a treasure not of metal, but of memory and bone. Near the town of Motala, archaeologists working at a site known as Kanaljorden made a discovery that was both haunting and profoundly puzzling. At the bottom of what was once a small lake during the Mesolithic period, around 8,000 years ago, they uncovered the remains of a ritual that defies easy explanation. Carefully placed on the lakebed were the skulls of at least 11 individuals, men, women, and even adolescents. But these were not simply discarded. Each skull had been deliberately mounted on a wooden stake, driven vertically into the clay as if to display the heads above the waterline for all to see. This was a constructed monument, a gallery of the dead erected in the heart of a living landscape. The details grew more complex and unsettling upon closer examination. Several of the skulls showed evidence of sharp-force trauma, wounds that had healed long before death, hinting at lives of conflict. More strikingly, one of the women's skulls was found with pieces of other human skull fragments carefully placed inside her cranial cavity. Another man's skull contained animal bones. This was not haphazard violence. It was a deliberate, intricate ceremony. Here, the treasure is not gold or jade, but a window into the human mind at the dawn of settled life. A glimpse of beliefs so alien to us, they can only be approached through theory. Was this an act of profound ancestor veneration, a way of keeping the protective spirits of the lineage physically present within the community's territory? The careful curation, the inclusion of all ages and sexes, and the placement in a significant body of water could support this. Alternatively, the trauma and the display could point to these being trophies of war, the heads of enemies taken in conflict and presented as symbols of power and warning. Yet the presence of women and children complicates a purely martial explanation. The most compelling theory suggests this was part of a complex mortuary practice, a multi-stage funeral rite. Perhaps after death, bodies were initially exposed or buried elsewhere. Once the flesh had decayed, the skulls were retrieved, treated, and then given this final public installation in the lake, a sacred space between the world of the living and the world of the spirits. The fragments placed inside the skulls might represent the reintegration of a person's community, or even the merging of souls. The sunken skulls of Motala resist a single, neat story. They force us to confront the fact that our distant ancestors possessed rich, symbolic inner lives and ritual complexities that we may never fully decipher. The true treasure here is the humbling realization that 8 millennia ago, people gathered at this lakeshore to perform a ceremony they believed was essential, using the most sacred material they had, their own departed, to speak to forces we can no longer hear. From the primal ritual of the sunken skulls, we leap forward into the gleaming sophistication of the Roman Empire. Here, luxury was not just about wealth, but about mastering the very fabric of the material world. In the hushed halls of the British Museum rests a small, delicate drinking vessel that seems to hold a piece of magic frozen in glass. Known as the Lycurgus cup, this is no ordinary Roman goblet. Carved from a single thick block of glass in the 4th century, it is a cage cup, a diatritum, where a delicate network of figures has been painstakingly cut away to leave a sculptural scene standing free from the outer wall. The scene depicts the mythical King Lycurgus, entangled in vines for his defiance of the god Dionysus. But the true wonder of this cup is not its intricate carving, it is its astonishing, impossible color. Hold it in one light, and it appears a calm, opaque jade green. Shine a light through it, and the entire vessel transforms, glowing a deep, translucent ruby red. For over 1,000 years, how this color change worked was a complete mystery, a secret lost with the fall of Rome itself. modern science has only recently unlocked its magic. The answer lies in the glass itself, which contains unimaginably tiny particles of gold and silver, each one less than 1,000th the width of a human hair. These are nanoparticles. The Roman artisans, through a process we still do not fully understand, managed to impregnate the molten glass with a precise mixture of these precious metals. When light hits the cup from the front, the nanoparticles scatter the blue and green wavelengths, making the glass appear green. When light passes through from behind, the particles allow the red wavelengths to dominate, creating that spectacular crimson glow. This was not an accident. It was ancient nanotechnology. The cup's exact burial origin is lost, but its very existence points to a truth about Roman elite society. An object this fragile, this technologically advanced, and requiring hundreds of hours of a master craftsman's labor, was not for everyday use. It was a supreme luxury item, almost certainly buried with a person of immense wealth and status, perhaps in a villa tomb or a high-status catacomb. It was a conversation piece designed to dazzle and intimidate guests at a banquet, a tangible demonstration of its owner's access to the very cutting edge of imperial art and science. To hold it would be to hold a piece of the future, a secret of light and matter that the modern world would not rediscover for another 1,500 years. The Lycurgus cup is a quiet revolution. It proves that ancient artisans were not just skilled copyists, but pioneering material scientists, manipulating matter at an invisible scale to create beauty that still defies expectation. It whispers that the treasures of the past are not always gold and stone, but sometimes are made of light, glass, and a genius we are only beginning to measure. That mastery of light and gold was not confined to the Roman world. In a small village that is now part of Romania, a farmer's plow struck a secret that had been hidden for nearly 1,000 years. The year was 1799, and the place was Năghisent Miklos. The farmer, working his field, hit something solid and metallic. What he pulled from the earth was not a single coin or a broken tool, but a magnificent hoard of 23 solid gold vessels, each one a masterpiece of early medieval craftsmanship. This was not a royal tomb, but a buried treasure chest, carefully concealed in a moment of crisis, perhaps from an invading army or a sudden uprising, and then never recovered by its owner. The vessels themselves are a historian's dream and a puzzle all at once. They form a breathtaking catalogue of cultural fusion. There are bowls, cups, jugs, and plates, all hammered from thick, luxurious gold. Their surfaces are alive with imagery that spans continents. You can see the clear, formal influence of the Byzantine Empire, with scenes of classical mythology like Hercules wrestling the Nemean lion. Next to these are motifs from the Persian world, with elegant, stylized animals and intricate geometric patterns. And woven throughout are the distinct, bold, artistic styles of the nomadic Avars and Bulgars, peoples who had swept across the steppes. One particularly stunning flask shows a warrior on horseback, a motif that echoes from the plains of Central Asia to the courts of Constantinople. But the true mystery of Năghisent Miklos is written on the vessels themselves, quite literally. Several bear inscriptions, and they are in two completely different languages. Some are in Greek, the administrative and holy language of the Byzantine Empire. Others are in a runic script used by Turkic peoples. One inscription, translated, reads, "This vessel contains 20 measures." Another, more poignantly, states, "The wine of the feast is mixed." These are not royal proclamations, but practical, almost intimate notes. This duality is the heart of the treasure's enduring riddle. Who owned this incredible service? Was it a nomadic chieftain who had grown wealthy and powerful, adopting the refined tastes and scripts of the settled empires he both traded with and raided? Or was it a Bulgarian noble, a Christianized ruler within a kingdom that straddled the cultural divide between the steppe and Byzantium, who commissioned a goldsmith's workshop to blend all the symbols of his complex world into one cohesive set. The treasure offers no easy answer. It exists in a historical borderland, a place where worlds collided and merged. The gold does not proclaim a single, pure identity, but a layered, sophisticated one. The owner likely saw no contradiction in having a cup decorated with a Greek hero next to one inscribed with Turkic runes. For them, this was simply what power and prestige looked like, a cosmopolitan blend that drew authority from multiple traditions. The Nagizent Miklos treasure is a frozen moment of conversation between cultures, a silent banquet set in gold, waiting for a host who never returned to claim it. Gold can tell a story, but it can also become a prisoner of one. Heinrich Schliemann, the man who declared he had found Agamemnon's face, was not finished chasing Homer's ghosts. Just a few years after Mycenae, he turned his attention to a windswept hill in modern Turkey called Hisarlik. Convinced this was the site of the legendary Troy, he began digging with the same fervent belief. In May of 1873, his team uncovered a find that would ignite his imagination and fuel controversy for generations. Buried within the layers of the ancient city, they found a hoard of breathtaking gold objects. Schliemann, in a characteristic flash of drama, declared it the treasure of Priam, the personal wealth of the very king whose downfall was chronicled in the Iliad. The collection was a royal fantasy made real. There were delicate golden diadems, one described as a headdress of Helen, composed of thousands of tiny gold chains that would have shimmered like liquid sunlight with every movement. There were elaborate drop earrings, heavy golden vessels, and a stunning array of beads and bracelets. For Schliemann, this was the ultimate proof. He had not only found Troy, he had held the jewelry of its queen. Modern archaeology, however, tells a different and perhaps more fascinating story. The layer of the city where Schliemann found the treasure dates to around 2400 BC, over 1,000 years earlier than the traditional date for the Trojan War. The treasure did not belong to Priam, but to a far earlier, wealthy Bronze Age society that flourished on that strategic hill long before Homer's epic was ever sung. This correction does not diminish the treasure's importance. It simply shifts its story from myth to history, revealing a powerful and sophisticated Troy that existed centuries before its most famous conflict. The treasure's modern journey is a saga of war and disappearance worthy of an epic itself. Schliemann smuggled the hoard out of the Ottoman Empire and eventually donated it to the Berlin Museum, where it remained a star attraction. Then, in the final chaos of the Second World War, it vanished. For decades, it was assumed destroyed in the Allied bombing or looted and melted down. The treasure of Priam became a ghost, a legend of a legend lost. Then, in the 1990s, a stunning secret emerged from the shadows of the Cold War. Russian officials quietly admitted that Soviet trophy brigades had taken the treasure as war reparations in 1945. It had been hidden away in the vaults of the Pushkin Museum in Moscow for half a century. Its reappearance was a geopolitical earthquake, raising profound and unresolved questions about the ownership of cultural heritage plundered by conquering armies, ancient and modern alike. Today, the gold of Troy sits in Moscow, claimed by Russia but sought by Germany and Turkey, a pawn in a diplomatic stalemate. It is a treasure forever caught between worlds, between the myth Schliemann crafted and the older history it actually represents, and now between the modern nations that view it as a symbol of victory, loss, or rightful patrimony. Gold can become a prisoner of history, but sometimes it is rescued from the very edge of oblivion. In the treacherous, sun-scorched borderlands between modern Tajikistan and Afghanistan, a story unfolded that mixed banditry, desperation, and a last-minute salvation. In the late 1870s, a group of merchants traveling near the ancient Oxus River were attacked by local bandits. They were robbed of everything, including a heavy, unassuming sack. The bandits, hoping for easy wealth, tore it open and found it filled not with coins, but with odd lumps of metal. Disappointed, they began to hurl the pieces into the river, thinking them worthless. A village elder, watching from a distance, realized the terrible mistake. He intervened, buying the remaining pieces from the furious bandits for a pittance. What they had nearly destroyed was the Oxus treasure, a collection of about 180 gold and silver artifacts from the height of the Achaemenid Persian Empire, dating to the 5th and 4th centuries before the Common Era. The treasure likely came from a temple or a looted royal burial site along the river, a sacred deposit that had survived for over 2 millennia, only to almost vanish in a moment of ignorance. The rescued hoard is a miniature encyclopedia of Persian imperial art. There are delicate model chariots pulled by 4 tiny horses, perfect replicas of the vehicles that carried Persian nobility. There are intricately engraved gold plaques depicting kings in combat with mythical beasts. A stunning collection of coins shows the faces of satraps, the provincial governors who ruled the empire's vast domains. But the masterpiece, the piece that defines the collection, is a gold armlet. This is not a simple bracelet, but a sculptural marvel. It terminates in the fierce, stylized heads of griffins, mythical creatures with the bodies of lions and the beaks of eagles. Made of solid gold, it is hollow to be wearable, yet monumental in its presence. This armlet was not mere jewelry. It was a symbol of divine favor and imperial power, likely worn by a prince or a high-ranking noble during official ceremonies. The value of the Oxus treasure goes far beyond the precious metal. Before its discovery, much of what we knew about Achaemenid art came from the grand stone reliefs at imperial capitals like Persepolis, or from descriptions written by their rivals, the Greeks. Those sources showed the empire in formal, official poses. This treasure reveals the intimate, portable wealth of the elite. It shows the Persian love for hybrid mythical creatures, their exquisite skill in metalworking, and the synthesis of artistic styles from across their empire, which stretched from the Indus Valley to Egypt. The model chariots and the griffin armlets are artifacts of a mobile court, objects designed to project power wherever the ruler traveled. The dramatic rescue of these pieces from bandits and a river is a fitting metaphor for the treasure itself. It is a fragile, glittering remnant pulled from the chaotic currents of history, a direct line to the opulence and artistry of an empire that once commanded the world, saved by a single observant man who saw value where others saw only scrap. A riverbank rescue preserved Persian gold, but a single trench in a Greek olive grove would rewrite an entire chapter of Aegean prehistory. In the spring of 2015, near the ancient palace of Pylos, archaeologists Jack Davis and Sharon Stocker made a discovery so significant it was described as the find of a lifetime. While excavating the site of a Mycenaean palace, their team uncovered something far more personal, a completely undisturbed shaft grave of a single warrior, buried around 1500 BC. The man, quickly dubbed the Griffin Warrior for a magnificent ivory plaque found beside him, was laid to rest with a treasure trove that was not just wealthy, but encyclopedic. Arrayed around his body were over 1,400 objects, a meticulous collection that served as a perfect time capsule of the late Bronze Age world. At his side lay his weapons, including a long bronze sword with a hilt exquisitely inlaid with ivory, still ready for battle. But the true wealth was not in arms alone. His body was adorned with jewelry of astonishing craftsmanship, including 4 heavy gold signet rings. These are not mere ornaments, they are miniature masterpieces. Using a technique so fine it requires a magnifying glass to appreciate, the rings are engraved with vivid scenes of combat and ritual. One shows a warrior in a duel, another depicts a goddess holding staffs while griffins look on, and a third presents a captivating scene of a woman presenting a bull's horn to a goddess, a direct window into Mycenaean religious practice. The sheer volume of seal stones, over 1,000 of them made of amethyst, agate, and gold, is unprecedented. These were the administrative tools of the era, used to stamp and sign documents on clay, and their variety and quality suggest this warrior was not just a fighter, but a high-ranking official, a man who controlled wealth, trade, and perhaps the very words of the palace. The ivory plaque that gave him his name is a work of art in itself, carved with the detailed figure of a griffin, a mythical beast that symbolized power and divine protection. What makes this tomb revolutionary is its context. For decades, archaeologists had been piecing together Mycenaean civilization from looted tombs or the ruins of palaces. Here, in one small sealed space, was a complete set of a high-status individual's belongings, all in their original positions. The grave acts like a Rosetta Stone for Mycenaean culture. The style of the engravings on the rings and seals shows an intense, direct connection to Minoan Crete, the advanced civilization on the island to the south. The mastery of the miniature scenes suggests that Mycenaean artists were not just copying Minoan styles, but were fully fluent in them, perhaps even being trained by Minoan masters. This single grave provided more concrete information about Mycenaean art, trade, religion, and social hierarchy than decades of prior excavation. The Griffin warrior was a bridge between worlds, buried with the symbols of both his martial Mycenaean homeland and the sophisticated Minoan culture his people admired and eventually overshadowed. His tomb reminds us that history's greatest treasures are sometimes not the largest, but the most complete. A single, silent story waiting in the dirt to connect 1,000 scattered fragments. The Griffin warrior's grave connected two known worlds, but in 1986, Chinese workers digging clay for bricks uncovered a civilization that was a world entirely unto itself. Near the town of Sansingdui in Sichuan province, they stumbled upon two large rectangular pits filled not with skeletons, but with a treasure so bizarre it seemed to have fallen from another planet. These were not tombs, but sacrificial pits, where a mysterious people called the Shu had ritually broken and buried their most sacred objects over 3,000 years ago. What they left behind was a collection of artifacts so radical, so utterly unlike anything from the contemporary Shang or Zhou dynasties, that it forced historians to tear up the map of early China. The first glimpse of this alien artistry comes in the form of giant bronze masks. These are not human faces as we know them. They are monumental, some over a meter wide, with grotesquely exaggerated features. Most haunting are the eyes, which are not simple indentations, but massive, protruding cylinders that look like telescopes or insect eyes, stretching out from the face as if to see into realms beyond our own. One mask has a pair of these protruding eyes, while another has a single, vertical eye in the center of its forehead. Were these depictions of gods, of mythical ancestors, or of kings possessing supernatural sight? The answer is lost, but the effect is undeniable, a visual language of power that is both terrifying and mesmerizing. Then there is the centerpiece, a bronze tree that stands over 4 meters tall. This is not a decorative sculpture, but a cosmic diagram cast in metal. Its trunk rises like a dragon, and from its branches hang birds, fruits, and mysterious ornaments. At its base, a 3-legged deity supports the entire structure. Most scholars believe this is a representation of the Fusang tree, a mythical tree from ancient Chinese legend that connected heaven, earth, and the underworld, with a sun perched on each branch. This was not art for a palace. It was a ritual object of staggering ambition, a ladder for shamans or spirits to climb between worlds. Alongside these bronze wonders were objects of pure, dazzling gold. A gold scepter, wrapped in a fish-scale pattern and topped with a human head, speaks of a ruler whose authority was both political and divine. But perhaps the most poignant treasures are the simplest, the over 100 elephant tusks also found in the pits. These came from Asian elephants that roamed the region's lush forests 3 millennia ago, a testament to a landscape now long vanished. The sheer volume of ivory suggests it was a primary offering, a sacrifice of immense value from the living world to the gods. The Sangsingdui treasures present an enigma with no written records to explain it. This Shu civilization was technologically peerless, capable of casting bronze on a scale and with a sophistication that matched any in the world. Yet their artistic vision was completely isolated. While the Shang dynasty to the east was creating intricate ritual vessels decorated with animal motifs for ancestor worship, the Shu were crafting these haunting, otherworldly masks and cosmic trees for a spiritual practice we can only guess at. Their discovery shattered the old narrative of Chinese civilization as a single, gradual spread from the Yellow River Valley. Instead, it revealed an ancient China of startling diversity, a land of multiple sophisticated cultures developing in parallel, each with its own profound and unique relationship with the cosmos. The pits of Sangsingdui are a message in a bottle from a lost people, written in a language of bronze and gold that we are still struggling to translate. The masks of Sangsingdui looked toward other worlds, but the very first glint of human social power may have come from a quiet cemetery on the shores of the Black Sea. In the 1970s, excavators working near the Bulgarian city of Varna uncovered a Copper Age cemetery that contained a revelation, the world's oldest processed gold treasure. These graves, dating to an astonishing 4,560 to 4,450 years before the Common Era, held artifacts that rewrote the timeline of human ambition. This was not the gold of pharaohs or emperors, but something far more foundational, the first spark of an idea that would shape all of human history. The idea that metal could mean more than utility. It could mean status. The necropolis contained over 3,000 gold artifacts, a dazzling array for a time when most of humanity was still using stone tools. There were delicate beads, heavy bracelets, polished plaques sewn onto clothing, and even a ceremonial axe with a solid gold handle. But the distribution of this wealth was what truly stunned archaeologists. The vast majority of graves held simple pottery or stone tools, the expected fare for the period. A select few, however, were lavishly appointed. One grave, known as Grave 43, held the remains of a man buried with over 1,500 gold objects, including a stunning penis sheath made of solid gold, a scepter with a gold-plated stone head, and countless beads that once adorned his tunic. He was clearly a person of immense importance, a chieftain or perhaps a priest-king. This is the earliest clear evidence we have of social stratification, a society where wealth and power were not shared equally, but concentrated in the hands of a few individuals who took their symbols of authority with them into the earth. The mystery of Varna is not just what they made, but how and why they made it so early. The people of the Varna culture were not a major empire, they were a localized farming and fishing community living on the coast. Yet, they developed metallurgical skills centuries ahead of their contemporaries in Mesopotamia and Egypt. They mastered the complex process of smelting copper and gold from local ores, achieving temperatures high enough to work the metal and then fashioning it with a jeweler's precision. Why here? One compelling theory points to geography. The region was rich in copper and gold deposits, providing the raw materials. But necessity alone does not create art. It may have been a combination of available resources and a unique cultural evolution where a stable society with surplus food allowed specialist craftsmen to emerge. These artisans, perhaps seen as possessing magical knowledge for transforming rock into luminous treasure, created objects that served a new social purpose. The gold was not currency. It was a physical manifestation of prestige, divine favor, and permanent social difference. When that chieftain in Grave 43 was buried with his golden scepter, it sent a message to the entire community, a message about power that survived his death. The Varna gold is a quiet, profound revolution. It marks the moment when humanity moved beyond valuing objects for their use and began to value them for what they represented. In those shining beads by the Black Sea, we see the birth of aristocracy, the dawn of inherited status, and the very first glimmer of a world where metal could buy not just goods, but influence, loyalty, and a legacy carved in light. That first spark of social power in Varna would one day fuel the engines of an empire. Centuries later, in the rolling hills of northern Greece, a tomb was sealed that held not just the treasures of a king, but the very origins of a legend. For over 2,000 years, the great tumulus at Aigai stood as a silent, grassy hill guarding its secrets. Then, in 1977, archaeologist Manolis Andronikos made a decision that would change history. He began to excavate the mound, and beneath it, he found not one, but several undisturbed tombs. One of them, Tomb 2, was a revelation. The door was still sealed, its paintings vibrant, and inside lay a collection of artifacts so precise, so personal, that they could only belong to one man, Philip II of Macedon, the father of Alexander the Great. This was the royal burial that historians had dreamed of, a direct, tangible link to the court that forged a conqueror. The centerpiece of the chamber was a large marble sarcophagus. Within it rested a solid gold larnax, small chest so heavy it took 2 people to lift. Its lid was embossed with a stunning symbol, the radiant star of the Argead dynasty, the family that ruled Macedon. Inside this golden box were the cremated bones of a man, carefully wrapped in a purple and gold cloth that had partially survived the ages. Forensic analysis would later confirm the bones showed a massive trauma to the right eye socket, consistent with the historical record of Philip being struck by an arrow that blinded him years before his death. Here was the physical proof, the mortal remains of the king who transformed Macedon from a backward kingdom into the supreme military power of Greece. But the treasures spoke of more than just his death. They celebrated his life and status. Resting atop the golden larnax was an object of breathtaking delicacy and symbolism, a wreath made entirely of gold oak leaves and acorns. Each leaf is a masterpiece of hammered gold, individually crafted and attached to a slender band, designed to sway and shimmer with a lifelike grace. This was no mere funeral offering. It was a symbol of Zeus, the king of the gods, and of royal power. To be crowned with oak was to be marked as divinely favored, a ruler whose authority came from the heavens themselves. One can almost see it resting on Philip's brow during a grand ceremony, catching the firelight before it was laid to rest forever. Perhaps the most intimate treasures, however, were not of gold, but of ivory. A set of exquisite miniature portraits was found in the tomb, carved from elephant tusk with a sensitivity that captures personality, not just likeness. One shows the face of a mature, bearded man with a commanding gaze and the unmistakable asymmetry of a damaged right eye. The other is a youthful, clean-shaven face with flowing hair and an expression of serene, idealized beauty. These are widely believed to be Philip and his son, the young Alexander. To hold these tiny portraits is to feel the weight of history in your palm. They are not monumental statues for public display, but private, precious objects, perhaps meant to accompany the king to ensure his lineage was recognized in the afterlife. They give us the faces of the 2 men who changed the world, one through ruthless political and military genius, the other through boundless ambition. The tomb at Vergina does more than confirm a historical figure's burial place. It provides a physical, visceral connection to the Macedonian court at its pivotal moment. Every object, from the warrior's armor also found within to these delicate personal items, paints a picture of a society that blended raw martial power with sophisticated Hellenistic artistry. This was the environment that shaped Alexander, a world where gold wreaths symbolized divine right and ivory portraits preserved family legacy. In this undisturbed chamber, We don't just find a king's treasure, we find the roots of an empire that would stretch from Greece to the borders of India, all contained within a single golden chest. The golden wreath of Philip connected a king to the gods, but a discovery in the blistering heat of the Judean desert revealed a religion of an entirely different scale. In 1961, an archaeological team surveying caves near the Dead Sea made a climb that would lead them to one of the most enigmatic treasures of the ancient world. High on a cliff face in the Nahal Mishmar Canyon, they entered a small, natural cave. Inside, tucked into a crevice and wrapped in a mat of straw, was a hoard that seemed to defy time itself. There were over 400 objects, not of gold or silver, but of a material that marked a revolution in human history: copper. This was the Chalcolithic period, the Copper Age, a time around 5,500 years ago, when communities were first experimenting with metal. But the Nahal Mishmar treasure was no collection of simple tools. These were objects of staggering ritual power, hidden away in a moment of crisis and waiting for over 6 millennia to be found. The first glimpse of these artifacts feels like looking into the mind of a lost religion. There are ornate crowns, not meant for a human head, but perhaps for a cult statue. They rise like fantastic cityscapes in metal, with horn-like projections and intricate patterns. There are scepters, some topped with strange, elegant baskets or animal heads, symbols of authority that had nothing to do with governing land and everything to do with channeling divine force. Most striking are the mace heads, weapons of war transformed into objects of ceremony. Dozens of them were bundled together, many made not from stone but cast from copper in elaborate shapes like rams, birds, and knotted cords. One famous example is the so-called standard, a hollow, decorated crown atop a long pole, which would have been a breathtaking sight when carried in a procession. Alongside the copper were delicate wands of hippopotamus ivory, another precious material imported from afar. This was not a king's burial wealth. This was the sacred toolkit of an entire community, a physical library of their most important spiritual ideas. Why was such a vital collection hidden in a remote cave, far from any settlement? The most compelling theory is one of flight and preservation. The Chalcolithic period in the Levant was a time of growing social complexity, but also likely of conflict. The treasure was carefully bundled and concealed, not looted or scattered. It suggests that a group of priests or guardians, facing an imminent threat, perhaps an invading group or a catastrophic social collapse, made a desperate journey into the desert. Their primary mission was not to save their own lives, but to save the soul of their community by protecting these sacred objects from desecration. They placed them in the cave, perhaps intending to return when the danger passed, but they never did. The silence that followed lasted for 55 centuries. The treasure's impact on our understanding is profound. Before its discovery, the Chalcolithic period was often viewed as a simple prelude to the great Bronze Age civilizations. Nahal Mishmar changed that completely. It proved that these early societies had developed a highly complex, organized religion with a specialized priestly class capable of orchestrating the mining, smelting, and casting of copper on an industrial scale. The uniformity of the objects suggests standardized rituals and the use of rare materials like ivory points to establish long-distance trade networks. This was not primitive idol worship, but a sophisticated belief system with its own iconography, hierarchy, and ceremonial regalia. The treasure gives us names for the gods we will never know, and scripts for the prayers we will never hear. It is a haunting reminder that the drive to connect with the divine and to protect that connection at all costs is one of humanity's oldest and most powerful treasures. The necropolis of Qinshi Huang held more than an army. In a separate pit, not far from the silent legions of soldiers, archaeologists uncovered a different kind of retinue, one meant for spectacle rather than war. This is the tomb of the terracotta acrobats and strongmen, a collection of figures so full of life and motion they seem frozen in mid-performance. Unlike the uniformed soldiers standing in rigid formation, these figures are caught in dynamic, almost impossible poses. One leans back in a deep arching back bend, his abdominal muscles taut under the clay. Another is a powerful strong man, his massive chest and bulging arms captured as if he is holding a great weight aloft. There are weightlifters, musicians, and dancers, each with a unique expression of concentration, effort, or joy on their individualized faces. They wear simple tunics, not armor, and their bodies twist and strain with a realism that makes the surrounding earth feel like a stage. Their purpose was not to protect the emperor, but to please him. Ancient Chinese belief held that the afterlife was a mirror of the earthly one, requiring all the comforts and entertainments of the court to continue. Qin Shi Huang, in his obsessive quest to recreate his entire world underground, did not stop at a military garrison. He commissioned an eternal troupe of performers to ensure his spirit would never want for amusement. This pit reveals a startlingly human dimension to the emperor's grand, terrifying project. It shows that his vision of eternity was not solely one of dominion and fear, but also of pleasure and diversion. He sought to take with him not just the power to command, but the luxury to be entertained. These acrobats add a crucial, often overlooked layer to our understanding of the necropolis. Together, the army, the officials, and now the performers paint a complete picture of a microcosm, a fully functioning imperial court suspended in time. The strongman's strained pose and the acrobat's graceful arc speak of a belief so comprehensive it accounted for every aspect of existence, from the security of the realm to the delight of the sovereign. In their silent performance, they remind us that the treasures of the afterlife were not always weapons or jewels, but sometimes the promise of joy itself, meticulously sculpted in clay. But while the acrobats performed for an emperor's spirit, a very different kind of treasure was being unearthed in a place far removed from imperial courts. In 1958, on a hill called El Carambolo, just outside Seville, Spain, a group of workmen digging for a sports club expansion struck metal. What they pulled from the red earth was not a single coin, but a heavy clay vessel containing 21 pieces of solid 24-karat gold. The treasure, carefully hidden in antiquity, was a revelation. Laid out, it formed the complete regalia of a person of immense sacred stature. There were 2 magnificent pectorals, heavy chest pieces designed to be worn over the heart, shaped like ox hides and decorated with exquisite, swirling patterns. There were 8 elaborate bracelets, some open, some closed, and a collection of plaques and chains, all crafted with a technique that seemed to shimmer with light. The most stunning feature was the intricate filigree, where threads of gold finer than a human hair were twisted, coiled and soldered onto the surface to create delicate, lace-like geometric and floral designs. This was not the bold, narrative art of Greece or the massive forms of Egypt, but something more fluid, more organic, a style born of the Atlantic world. The moment it was found, a fierce debate began, one that continues to this day. Who did this gold belong to? The treasure dates to a pivotal time between the 8th and 6th centuries before the Common Era, when the Iberian Peninsula was a cultural crossroads. One school of thought points to the local people, the Tartessos. This civilization, mentioned in the Bible and by Greek writers as a land of fabulous wealth beyond the Pillars of Hercules, was known for its rich silver and gold mines. The ox-hide shape of the pectorals could be a symbol of Tartessian power, linked to the sacred bull, an animal frequently depicted in their art. This theory paints El Carambolo as the treasure of a Tartessian king or high priest, a symbol of an indigenous, sophisticated Atlantic culture that flourished long before Rome. The other theory looks to the sea, At precisely this time, Phoenician traders from the eastern Mediterranean, from cities like Tyre and Sidon, were establishing colonies along the Spanish coast, such as nearby Guardia, modern-day Cadiz. They came for precious metals, and they brought their own advanced techniques and religious practices. The filigree work on the treasure is strikingly similar to jewelry found in Phoenician sites in the Levant. Furthermore, the hill of El Carambolo itself was later discovered to be the site of a temple dedicated to the Phoenician goddess Astarte. Could this hoard then be the sacred vestments of a Phoenician priest serving at that temple, or the hidden wealth of a merchant prince? The truth may lie in a fusion, a beautiful and complex synthesis. The Tartessos were not isolated. They traded actively with the Phoenicians, adopting and adapting foreign ideas while maintaining their own identity. The gold of El Carambolo could be the ultimate product of this meeting. Perhaps it was crafted by local Tartessian goldsmiths using Phoenician techniques for a ritual that blended both worlds. It represents a moment of cultural conversation where the mysterious, wealthy lords of Atlantic Spain engaged with the seafaring merchants of the Mediterranean, creating objects of power that were unique to that time and place. This treasure is not just gold, it is a question cast in metal, asking us to define where one culture ends and another begins, and reminding us that the greatest riches are often found in the spaces between worlds. A continent away from the Spanish gold, another tomb captured a nation's soul at the very moment it was being remade. In the quiet woodlands of Japan's Nara prefecture, the Fujinoki tomb is a keyhole-shaped mound, a classic form of the Kofun period. But when archaeologists carefully excavated it in the late 1980s, they found it was not a time capsule of an old Japan, but a glittering snapshot of a new one being born. This was no ordinary burial. It was the resting place of what many call the Shining Prince, and his treasures were a bridge between worlds. Inside the stone burial chamber, the artifacts gleamed with a hybrid beauty. There were magnificent gilt bronze horse trappings, saddles and ornaments so lavishly decorated with intricate openwork and inlaid glass that they spoke of a society where the horse was not just transport, but a supreme symbol of aristocratic power and mobility. Alongside them lay a stunning gold and bronze crown, not heavy and solid, but constructed of delicate, cut-out metal leaves and dangling ornaments that would have shimmered with every movement, catching the light like a personal sunrise. The pottery, too, was revolutionary. Fine Su-ware vessels thrown on a fast wheel and fired at intense temperatures, a technology that had just arrived from the Korean peninsula. Every object in that chamber whispered the same story, one of profound cultural influx. The tomb dates to the late 6th century, a period of frantic change in Japan. The ruling Yamato court was actively seeking knowledge and prestige from the mainland, particularly from the Korean kingdom of Baekje. Craftsmen, scholars, and Buddhist monks crossed the sea, bringing with them new technologies, new art styles, and a new religion that would forever alter the Japanese landscape. The treasures of Fujinoki are a physical record of this moment. The techniques used in the metalwork, the designs on the horse trappings, even the shape of the crown, all show direct and masterful Korean influence. Yet they were made for a Japanese noble, blending these imported styles with local sensibilities to create something uniquely powerful for the islands. This has led many historians to a tantalizing possibility, that this may be the tomb of Prince Shotoku Taishi. A legendary figure, Shotoku is credited as the great patron who championed Buddhism against conservative clans, established a centralized government, and sent embassies directly to China. He is the archetype of the enlightened ruler who looked outward to shape his nation's future. Whether the bones in Fujinoki are truly his may never be proven, but the symbolism is perfect. The treasures embody his very legacy, a fusion of foreign inspiration and native ambition. They are not just grave goods, but diplomatic artifacts, showing a court eagerly dressing itself in the material culture of a wider, more sophisticated continental world. The prince, if it is he, was not buried with the old gods of Japan, but with the dazzling tools of a new era, his crown a halo of cultural change, and his silent horses ready to carry him into a reinvented afterlife. The shining prince's tomb looked toward the future, but another Spanish horde reached back into a much older, more mysterious past. In 1963, on the outskirts of the town of Villena, a simple construction worker named José María Soler was digging in a gravel pit when his shovel struck something that did not sound like stone. What he carefully unearthed was a single ceramic vessel, and inside was a treasure that would become one of the most important Bronze Age discoveries in all of Europe. This was not a grave, but a hidden cache, a collection of 59 objects of breathtaking craftsmanship, deliberately buried and never retrieved. The treasure was a symphony of materials, each piece telling a different part of a story we can only partially hear. There were bottles and bowls of pure 23-karat gold, their surfaces smooth and luminous. There were bracelets, some simple bands, others intricately decorated with geometric patterns, and delicate rings that would have adorned the fingers of someone of immense status. Alongside the gold were pieces of silver and even beads of amber, a fossilized resin that had traveled from the distant Baltic, proving this was a society connected to far-flung trade networks. But two objects in the hoard were not like the others, and they hold the key to the treasure's true significance. Nestled among the gold were a small hollow hemisphere and a bracelet, both made of a dark, unassuming metal, iron. To our modern eyes, iron seems common, even crude next to gold. But in the context of the Iberian Bronze Age, around 3,000 years ago, these pieces were revolutionary. Widespread ironworking, the Iron Age, was still centuries away for this region. This metal was not smelted from local ore in large quantities. It was rare, possibly meteoric in origin, and extraordinarily difficult to work. The fact that someone had managed to shape it into recognizable objects and then placed it alongside their most precious gold speaks volumes. In this moment of history, iron was not a utilitarian material for tools and weapons. It was a magical substance, a technological prestige item as valuable as the sun-like gold it was buried with. The person who owned this collection was not just wealthy, they were powerful in a way that transcended mere economics. They had access to the newest, most secret knowledge of the material world. The iron objects were likely symbols of esoteric power, perhaps believed to hold celestial properties because they came from the sky. The treasure of Villena, therefore, is a frozen snapshot of a technological tipping point. It captures the exact moment when a new metal entered the elite imagination, not as a replacement for bronze, but as a companion to gold in the lexicon of status and the supernatural. This hidden pot is a testament to a chieftain or a ritual specialist who understood that true treasure was not just about beauty or weight, but about possessing the future, even if that future was forged in a dark, mysterious metal from the star. The treasure of Villena held the future in iron, but a grave in Spain would soon challenge our deepest assumptions about the past. In 2019, archaeologists working at a Copper Age site near Valencia, known as La Almoloya, uncovered a tomb that was lavish, mysterious, and utterly revolutionary. The structure itself was a statement, a large stone kist built directly beneath the floor of what appeared to be a governing hall, a place of power. Inside, the remains of a single individual lay surrounded by an offering of staggering opulence. This was not a collection of gold, but of rarities that spoke of connections spanning continents. There were over 25 exquisite ivory tusks, likely from African elephants, a material that had traveled an incredible distance. There were beads of amber from the cold Baltic north and delicate ornaments made from ostrich eggshell, a material from the arid landscapes of Africa or the Middle East. Resting by the body was a dagger of stunning beauty, its blade crafted from a single, flawless piece of rock crystal, its hilt inlaid with tiny amber discs. Every object was a masterpiece of procurement and craft, a testament to a person who commanded respect, trade, and the finest artisans of the age. For years, based on the grave's prominence and the presence of such wealth and a weapon, researchers referred to the individual with a tentative, masculine title, the Prince of La Almoloya. But science had a different story to tell. Advanced analysis of the skeletal remains, specifically the peptides in the tooth enamel, provided a definitive answer. This was not a prince. This was a woman. She has since been rightfully renamed the Ivory Lady. This single biological fact transforms the entire tomb from a remarkable find into a landmark discovery. It forces a profound reconsideration of power structures in prehistoric Europe over 4,000 years ago. The traditional narrative often assigns high-status burials with weapons and exotic goods to male chieftains or warriors. The Ivory Lady shatters that template. Here was a biologically female individual buried in the most prestigious location in the settlement, accompanied by objects that signify not just wealth, but likely spiritual and political authority. The crystal dagger may not have been a tool of war, but a symbol of ritual power or leadership. The ivory tusks and amber were not merely pretty trinkets, but evidence of her control over vast international exchange networks. She was clearly a central figure, a leader whose community invested immense resources to honor her passage into the afterlife. The implications ripple far beyond this one grave. It suggests that in this Copper Age society, and perhaps in others we have misread, leadership was not inherently tied to biological sex. A woman could occupy the highest echelon of social, economic, and possibly religious power. Her grave goods were not those of a companion or a priestess in a supporting role, but of the paramount authority herself. The Ivory Lady does not just give us a new treasure, she gives us a new lens. She asks us to look again at other high-status burials where assumptions have been made without scientific verification, and to question the stories we have told ourselves about who held the dagger, who controlled the trade, and who truly ruled in the deep past. Her silent, crystal-bladed rebuttal is one of the most powerful discoveries in modern archaeology, proving that sometimes the greatest treasure is not the object in the ground, but the truth it uncovers about ourselves. Gold and crystal defined the Ivory Lady, but a farmer's plow in Ukraine would soon reveal the fortune of a man who lived by the sword and the treaty. In the year 1912, near the village of Pereshchepina, a peasant's blade struck metal not far beneath the black earth. What he had found was not a single coin, but the complete, spectacular burial assemblage of a nomadic king from the turbulent 7th century. This was the grave of a Bulgar leader, a man whose people moved across the vast steppe, and his treasures spoke a language of pure, dazzling power. The sheer volume was staggering, over 800 individual objects of gold and silver, each one a chapter in a life lived at the crossroads of empires. There were weapons of war, including an ornate sword and a quiver of arrows, their tips still sharp, ready for a conflict that would never come in the afterlife. But the true story was told in the objects of peace and prestige. The hoard contained a fortune in coins, many minted by the Byzantine Empire in far-off Constantinople. This was not just money, it was political evidence. These coins were likely diplomatic gifts, tribute payments, or the profits from mercenary service, showing that this chieftain was a recognized player in the grand game between the settled empires and the nomadic confederations. Alongside the Byzantine gold were pieces of exquisite Sasanian silver from Persia, plates and vessels decorated with the royal imagery of the Shahs. This collection was a map of influence drawn in precious metal. The centerpiece, however, was a statement meant for one man's neck alone, a massive gold necklace or torque of breathtaking weight and craftsmanship. It was not a delicate chain, but a solid, commanding circle of gold, meant to be seen from across a crowded tent. To wear such an object was to proclaim one's status physically, a permanent, heavy reminder of authority that rested directly on the collarbone. The Pereshchepina treasure is the ultimate portrait of steppe nobility. It explodes the old myth of nomads as simple, rootless raiders. This chieftain was a sophisticated accumulator, a diplomat, and a warlord. He grew wealthy not merely by taking, but by strategically positioning himself between the two great superpowers of his age, Byzantium and Persia. He accepted their gold as an ally or a threatening neighbor, traded for their silver, and perhaps led his warriors into battle under their banners. His burial shows he understood the symbols of both worlds, and he took them all with him. His grave is not a tomb of a single culture, but a trophy room of Eurasian politics, where every gold coin was a sealed pact, and every silver plate was a connection to a distant, glittering court. In the quiet Ukrainian soil, this king built a monument not to a homeland, but to a horizon, proving that the greatest treasure of the steppe was a network of loyalties, fears, and alliances, all forged into wearable, spendable, breathtaking gold. The steppe chieftain's gold spoke of alliances, but in the dense jungles of southern Mexico, a queen was prepared for a journey through a far more perilous underworld. Deep within the heart of the ancient Maya city of Palenque, within a structure known simply as Temple 13, archaeologists made a discovery that was both beautiful and chilling. In a sealed stone sarcophagus, they found the remains of a woman who had been transformed for eternity. Her bones and the objects around her were completely covered in a brilliant vermilion-red powder. This was not a stain of violence, but a sacred pigment, cinnabar, made from ground mercury ore. For the Maya, the color red was the color of life, blood, and the rising sun in the east. To coat a body in this vibrant powder was an act of profound spiritual alchemy, a ritual meant to ensure rebirth and to energize the soul for its dangerous voyage through the dark realms of Xibalba, the Maya underworld. This was the tomb of the Red Queen. The treasures surrounding her were fitting for a woman of the highest elite. Her body was adorned with a regal assortment of jade, the Maya's most precious stone, symbolizing water, vegetation, and eternal life. A delicate diadem of jade beads would have circled her head, and a stunning mosaic mask of jade plaques likely covered her face, though time had caused it to collapse upon her skull. Around her neck were multiple strands of beads, not just of jade, but also of luminous freshwater pearls from distant rivers, and even pieces of obsidian and shell. Each material was carefully chosen, a map of the Maya cosmos in miniature: green stone from the earth, white pearl from the water, black volcanic glass from the realm of the night. Yet her journey was not taken alone. Outside her burial chamber, in an antechamber, the skeletons of two other individuals were found. These were not family members laid to rest beside her, but sacrificial victims, likely servants or retainers, killed to accompany and serve her in the afterlife. This sobering practice underscores the Maya belief that royal authority and divine connection transcended death itself, requiring a retinue even in the world of the gods. Who was this woman, crowned in jade and cloaked in sacred red? While her name is lost, chemical analysis of her bones and the context of her tomb provide compelling clues. She was not the city's most famous ruler. That title belongs to Palenque, great King Pakal, whose own lavish tomb lies in the adjacent Temple of the Inscriptions. However, the Red Queen was buried with comparable honor in her own right, in a prime location within the royal acropolis. Some scholars believe she may have been Pakal's wife, the Queen Zakbu Aja, or perhaps his mother. What is undeniable is her status. The tomb reveals that elite Maya women could wield immense social and religious power, acting as crucial political partners and dynastic anchors. She was not a silent consort, but a key figure in the sacred drama of royal lineage, her rebirth as vital to the kingdom's continuity as any king's. Her crimson-coated tomb is a silent, powerful testament to the role of women in weaving the fabric of Maya divinity, ensuring that the life-giving sun would rise again, both for her soul and for the kingdom she left behind. The Red Queen's journey was one of spiritual transformation, but for another family in a distant corner of the empire, the only transformation was a sudden, desperate flight. In November of 1992, a farmer named Peter Watling was searching for a lost hammer in a field near the village of Hoxton in Suffolk, England. His metal detector, borrowed for the occasion, let out a shrieking signal. Expecting a piece of scrap, he and a friend began to dig. Just a few feet down, their spades struck not iron, but silver, and then more silver, and then gold. What they had found was not a grave, but a time capsule of panic, the largest hoard of late Roman gold and silver ever discovered in Britain. Carefully packed into a small oak chest and buried in a pit were over 15,000 gold and silver coins, dozens of pieces of exquisite gold jewelry, and a stunning collection of silver tableware. This was not a ceremonial deposit for the gods. It was a family's entire liquid wealth, hidden in a hurry. The coins themselves tell a precise story of the end of an era. The latest of them were minted between 407 and 408, a date that echoes through history. It was the year the last Roman legions were ordered to permanently withdraw from Britain, leaving the province to defend itself against Saxon raids and internal strife. For a wealthy Romano-British family, the world was collapsing. The orderly system of Roman law and military protection that had safeguarded their estate for generations was vanishing. Faced with imminent danger, the family's patriarch made a heartbreaking decision. He gathered the most valuable portable symbols of his family's status: the gold necklaces and bracelets, the intricate silver spoons and ladles, the pepper pot shaped like a noblewoman's head, and every single coin he could muster, and he buried them. The hope, clearly, was to return when the trouble passed. But the trouble never passed, and the family never came back. The hoard lay forgotten for 1,584 years. Each object in the chest speaks of a sophisticated, comfortable life, abruptly interrupted. The silver tableware is of the highest quality, including a beautiful strainer for filtering wine and delicately engraved bowls. The jewelry is personal and lavish, like a body chain of fine gold links meant to be worn across a woman's tunic. Even the coins are not just currency, but portraits bearing the faces of emperors who could no longer offer any protection from a Suffolk field. This is the treasure not of a tomb, but of a household. It reveals the immense private wealth that existed at the edges of the empire and the fragile peace that allowed such luxury to flourish. The Hoxton hoard gives us no bones, no grand monument. Instead, it gives us a moment of profound human anxiety, a family's desperate bid to preserve their world in a hole in the ground. In that buried chest, we don't find the story of a death, but the story of a life that was forced to stop, its glittering contents waiting in the dark for a normalcy that would never return. The Hoxton hoard was a family's fortune hidden from chaos, but some treasures were never meant to be spent or even seen by human eyes. Scattered across the ancient soils of Scandinavia, from Denmark to Sweden and Norway, are thousands of secrets no larger than a fingernail. These are the guldgubbar, the little gold old men, though many depict women, couples, and animals as well. Imagine a sheet of gold foil, thinner than a leaf, hammered to the point of fragility. Upon this tiny canvas, an artisan would carefully stamp or press a design from a carved die, creating a miniature silhouette of stunning detail. Some show a man and a woman facing each other, often holding a branch or a cup between them, in a pose that feels intimate and ceremonial. Others feature a single, majestic figure, perhaps a god or an ancestor, in elaborate robes. There are animals too, like boars or horses, creatures loaded with symbolic meaning in the Norse world. They are not jewelry, they are too fragile to be worn. They are not currency, their value is purely spiritual. So what were these countless, delicate golden whispers used for? Their discovery sites tell a compelling story. They are rarely found in hoards like other treasure. Instead, they are uncovered one by one, or in small clusters in the most foundational places of a community. They turn up in the post holes of great halls, those grand wooden structures that were the heart of Norse power and social life. They are found at the entrances to houses, along fence lines, and, importantly, within burial mounds. This placement is the key. Driving a guldgubba into the earth at the base of a hall's main support post was not a casual act. It was an offering, a sealing of a pact. The hall was more than a building. It was the embodiment of the chieftain's luck, his family's fortune, and the community's safety. By burying these gold foils, the people were quite literally investing the structure with divine blessing, asking the gods or the spirits of the land for protection, fertility, and prosperity for all who lived under that roof. When placed in graves, they likely served as a compact token for the deceased, a small piece of divine favor to ensure safe passage or a blessed status in the afterlife. Their artistry, though minute, is profound. The figures are stylized yet full of life, their gestures frozen in a moment of offering or union. The couple motif is especially powerful, possibly representing the sacred marriage between the god Freya, associated with fertility and kingship, and the goddess Gerd, a symbol of the earth. This single image, repeated thousands of times across the landscape, becomes a prayer for the fruitfulness of the land, the lineage, and the tribe itself. In a world of epic sagas and roaring longships, the guldgubbar represent the quiet, personal side of pagan belief. They were the everyday magic of a farming society, a way for ordinary people, through their leaders, to touch the divine. They required no grand temple, only a moment of intention and a sliver of the sun's metal pressed into the dark earth. While swords and necklaces proclaimed power in life, these tiny foils worked silently in the background, weaving a protective golden net under the very feet of a civilization, asking the unseen forces for nothing more and nothing less than a good harvest, healthy children, and a hall that stood strong against the long winter night. While the guldgubbar were delicate prayers pressed into Nordic soil, an ancient Chinese aristocrat prepared for an afterlife of thunderous, earth-shaking power. In the heart of China's Henan province, near the ancient capital of Luoyang, archaeologists uncovered a tomb complex that spoke not in whispers, but in the unmistakable language of the battlefield. This was not merely a burial chamber, it was a military garage for eternity, belonging to a noble of the Western Zhou dynasty around 3,000 years ago. The tomb itself was grand, but the true spectacle lay in the pits dug directly beside it. There, sealed under layers of earth, were not just artifacts, but complete war machines. The archaeologists found perfectly preserved wooden chariots, their structure long since decayed, leaving behind a perfect ghostly imprint in the soil like a photograph. But the metal parts remained, gleaming and in place. Intricate bronze fittings outlined the shape of the chariot box. There were large bronze axle caps, decorated with fierce animal faces, and bronze linchpins that once held the wheels securely to the axle. Most striking were the bronze jewel, the tubular fittings that held the chariot's rails together, each one cast with intricate patterns of dragons and spirals. This was a vehicle stripped down to its essential metallic skeleton, and every piece was a work of art and engineering. Yet the chariot was not alone in its pit. Before it, arranged as if ready to charge, were the skeletons of 2 horses. They were still in their harness, the bronze bits still in their mouth, the remains of leather straps and ornaments tracing their outlines in the earth. And in the driver's position of the chariot box itself lay the skeleton of the charioteer. This was not a symbolic offering of separate objects, but a frozen moment of a complete military unit, sacrificed and interred in full working order. This practice, known as an accompanying burial, was a hallmark of early Chinese elite culture. The charioteer and the horses were not killed in anger, but were likely servants and animals specifically chosen to continue their service beyond death. Their presence guaranteed the tomb's owner would have his swift, prestigious transport and a skilled driver ready the moment he arrived in the spirit world. The sheer scale of these chariot pits reveals a profound truth about the Western Zhou dynasty. The chariot was far more than a tool of war. It was the ultimate symbol of aristocratic power and the very engine of the state. In an era before large cavalry units, the chariot was the tank of the ancient world, fast, intimidating, and requiring immense resources to build and maintain. Only the highest nobility could afford the skilled craftsmen, the expert trainers, and the teams of prized horses required to field one. To be buried with your chariot was to proclaim your status in the most unambiguous terms possible. It said you were a warrior noble, a commander, a person whose authority was literally mounted on wheels. The careful, respectful placement of the entire assembly, horses, driver, and vehicle, shows that this was not just about displaying wealth, but about preserving a functional relationship. In the afterlife, as in life, the aristocrat's power, mobility, and very identity were inseparable from the chariot that carried him into battle and ceremony. These silent pits in Luoyang hold the echo of hoofbeats and rolling wheels, a final, breathtaking statement that for the Zhou elite, true treasure was not just owned, it was harnessed, driven, and taken with you. High in the rugged mountains of the Armenian highlands, a kingdom built its wealth on metal and war. The ancient kingdom of Urartu, a rival to Assyria at the height of its power, left behind fortresses that cling to cliff sides and tombs carved deep into the rock. One such place, the cemetery at Mokra Bleu, offers a stunning glimpse into the lives and deaths of its elite, a people who believed the afterlife demanded the full splendor of a warrior's kit. Within cool, stone-lined chamber tombs, archaeologists have uncovered treasures that speak of a culture where artistry was forged in bronze for both ceremony and conquest. The most iconic finds are the wide bronze belts. These were not simple strips of metal, but thick, heavy bands designed to be worn around the waist, often engraved with intricate scenes that unfold like a sacred comic strip. You might see a procession of chariots, a hunting scene with galloping stags, or rows of mythical creatures like winged griffins. These were not merely decorative, they were narratives of power, likely depicting rituals or heroic deeds that affirmed the wearer's status and divine favor. To clasp on such a belt was to gird oneself with the stories of the kingdom itself. Alongside these belts, placed carefully in the tombs, were the tools of elite mobility and warfare, most notably elaborate horse bits and bridle ornaments. Urartu was famous for its cavalry, and controlling a powerful horse was a direct symbol of military might and aristocratic privilege. The bits found at Mokra Bleu are masterpieces of functional art, often made of bronze with intricate cheek pieces shaped like animals or gods. They were designed for control, yes, but also for display, jingling with authority as a warrior rode into battle or a funeral procession. Perhaps the most striking objects for modern eyes are the bronze cauldrons. These were large, impressive vessels, but their true magnificence lay at the rim. Cast onto the sides were three-dimensional protomes, the heads and forequarters of powerful bulls, staring outward with a serene, eternal strength. These cauldrons were not for everyday cooking. They were for ritual feasting, likely used in ceremonies to honor the gods or the deceased before being buried as a permanent offering. The bull was a potent symbol in Urartu, representing the storm god Haldi, the kingdom's chief deity, embodying both fertility and terrifying power. To own such a cauldron was to claim a direct connection to the divine source of the kingdom's authority. The treasures of Mokra Blur, taken together, paint a vivid portrait of a society that was deeply interconnected. The artistic styles on the belts show influences from both their Assyrian rivals to the south and the nomadic cultures of the north. The advanced lost wax casting technique used for the bull protomes was a technology shared across the ancient Near East. This was not an isolated mountain kingdom, but a sophisticated player in a vast economic and cultural network, its wealth flowing from rich copper and iron mines. These chamber tombs were more than final resting places. They were armored vaults for a warrior aristocracy's identity. Every engraved chariot on a belt, every fierce animal on a bit, every divine bull on a cauldron was a piece of a creed, a belief that status, skill in battle, and the favor of the gods were possessions you could and must take with you into the dark. The Eurasian cauldrons held the heads of sacred bulls, but a Celtic chieftain in France chose to be buried with a face from a world he had never seen. In the quiet countryside near the town of Laval, in the Champagne region, a routine archaeological survey in 2015 revealed something extraordinary. Beneath a modest, overgrown mound lay a burial chamber that would shatter our understanding of the early Iron Age. This was the tomb of a Celtic prince, a man of immense local power who died in the 5th century before the Common Era, centuries before Julius Caesar would write of the Gauls. But his grave goods did not tell a local story. They spoke of rivers that flowed far beyond the forests of France, all the way to the shores of the Mediterranean. The centerpiece of the chamber was a masterpiece that must have stunned its discoverers. It was a massive bronze cauldron, nearly a meter in diameter, resting on an ornate iron stand. But this was no ordinary cooking pot. Around its rim, crafted with breathtaking skill, was a decorative frieze of 8 heads, and at the base of each handle, staring out with a calm, powerful gaze, was the bearded face and bull's horns of Achelous, the Greek god of rivers. This was an object of pure Greek manufacture, likely crafted in a workshop in the Greek colonies of southern Italy or Sicily. It had then traveled over 1,000 miles across the Alps and into the heart of Celtic territory to become the most prized possession of a barbarian chieftain. Inside this cauldron, the connection grew even more astonishing. It was packed with a complete imported drinking set fit for a symposium, the Greek ritual of aristocratic drinking and conversation. There was a beautifully painted Greek wine jug, an ornate Etruscan pitcher for mixing wine and water, and fine drinking cups. For the Celtic prince, this was not merely exotic tableware. It was the ultimate tool of power. In Celtic society, as in the Greek world, the feast was the primary stage for politics. A chieftain proved his status and secured the loyalty of his warriors by hosting lavish banquets, distributing food, and, most importantly, pouring wine. The ability to serve fine Mediterranean wine from such spectacular vessels was a performance of supreme prestige. It showed he had access to the longest, most sophisticated trade networks imaginable. He could offer his followers a taste of a legendary southern culture they knew only through stories and rare, precious objects. The Laval burial forces us to redraw the map of pre-Roman Europe. It reveals a continent already deeply interconnected, not through empire, but through elite exchange. This prince was no isolated tribal leader. He was a cosmopolitan consumer at the northern end of a vast commercial chain. Greek and Etruscan merchants, seeking valuable raw materials like amber, tin, and slaves from the Celtic north, would have brought these luxury goods as trade items or diplomatic gifts. In return, the Celtic elite gained symbols that elevated them above their rivals. They did not simply copy Mediterranean styles, they absorbed them into their own potent rituals, using a Greek god's face to sanctify their local feasts. The tomb is a frozen moment of selective adoption. The prince was buried with his chariot and his golden torque, the classic symbols of Celtic authority. But placed squarely among them was this Mediterranean drinking service. He did not want to become Greek. He wanted to harness the magic of the Mediterranean to become a better, more powerful, and more dazzling Celtic chief. His treasure is a dialogue cast in bronze, a conversation between two worlds that would one day collide in war. But here, in the dim light of a burial chamber, met in a shared understanding that true influence is always served in a cup, and sometimes that cup is borne by a river god from a distant land. The Celtic prince's imported feast was a testament to ancient trade, but a hilltop in northern Afghanistan held a treasure that was the entire ancient world in miniature. In 1978, a Soviet-Afghan archaeological team led by Viktor Sarianidi was excavating a site called Tilia Tepe, the Golden Hill. What they uncovered, just months before the Soviet invasion plunged the nation into decades of war, was not a single royal tomb, but a silent, glittering necropolis of 6 nomadic burials. These were the graves of a wealthy chieftain and 5 women, likely his wives or concubines, from the 1st century before the Common Era to the 1st century after. The bodies had been laid in wooden coffins, and over them the excavators poured a cascade of gold. The total count was staggering, over 20,000 individual gold items. This was not a hoard of coins, but a wardrobe of power, a personal treasury sewn onto clothing, braided into hair, and draped over skin. To enter one of these burial chambers was to step into a kaleidoscope. The artisans who crafted these objects lived at the literal crossroads of Eurasia along the Silk Road, and they absorbed every influence that passed by. A single piece of jewelry could tell a story that spanned continents. One pendant might show the Greek goddess Athena in full armor, her expression serene and classical. Another would depict the Indian god Shiva with multiple arms and a serene, meditative pose. A belt buckle could feature a chariot driver in a style straight from China, while a dagger's hilt was decorated with the coiled, animal-style art of the Siberian steppes. This was not haphazard collection, it was intentional synthesis. The nomads were not merely passive recipients of foreign goods, they were active curators of a global identity, wearing their cosmopolitan connections for all, and for the gods to see. Among the most breathtaking pieces is the crown of the woman in Burial 6. It is a delicate, collapsible diadem, made not as a solid circlet, but as a band from which rise 5 intricate, tree-like forms, each dotted with tiny flowers and studded with turquoise and pearls. At the center of each tree stands a figure, and one of them is unmistakably the Greek Aphrodite, goddess of love, rendered in the gold of Central Asia. Scholars call her the Bactrian Aphrodite, a perfect symbol of this cultural fusion. Then there are the shoes. The women were buried with soft leather boots, but these were no ordinary footwear. The entire surface, from sole to ankle, was completely covered in hundreds of small, overlapping gold plaques, each one stamped with a design. To walk in these would have been to shimmer with every step, to literally tread in gold. The treasure's story, however, is shadowed by profound tragedy. Sarianidis' team excavated it in a narrow window of peace, completing their work just as political tensions were erupting into full-scale war. As the Soviet invasion began and conflict consumed Afghanistan, the fate of the gold became a paramount concern. To save it from looting or destruction, it was secretly moved and hidden away. For years, its whereabouts were a state secret, with rumors swirling that it had been lost or melted down. It was not until 2003, after the fall of the Taliban, that a brave group of Afghan museum officials revealed they had safeguarded the treasure the entire time, moving it from hiding place to hiding place, often at great personal risk. They had kept the Golden Hill safe, not in the earth, but in a vault and in their unwavering dedication. Today, the gold of the 7 kings stands as a paradox. It is one of the greatest archaeological discoveries of the 20th century. a peerless record of ancient globalization, yet it remains largely unseen by the world, locked away for its own protection. It is a treasure that speaks of breathtaking openness, of cultures meeting and merging on the bodies of nomadic royalty. Yet it is now isolated, a prisoner of the very modern conflicts that echo the ancient battles its owners might have known. It reminds us that the greatest treasures are sometimes not those we can visit in a museum, but those that survive as a promise, a glittering hidden testament to a time when the world was both vast and intimately connected, all contained within 6 coffins on a hilltop, soon to be lost to the fog of war. Her silvered hands rested in the dark soil of southern Spain for over 2 millennia, a final, personal statement of identity. In the ancient Iberian settlement of Castulo, archaeologists uncovered a tomb from the 4th century before the Common Era that felt strikingly intimate. The skeletal remains were those of a woman, and on each of her fingers she wore a ring. Not 1 or 2, but 10 in total, all crafted from gleaming silver. This delicate, persistent detail earned her the poetic name, the Lady of the Silver Hands. The rings themselves were simple in form, mostly smooth bands, but their collective presence spoke volumes. This was not a display of overwhelming royal wealth, but a deliberate, curated presentation of the self. In life, these rings would have caught the light with every gesture, a soft, metallic whisper of her status. In death, they became a permanent part of her physical being, as integral as her bones. They suggest a society where personal adornment for women was not frivolous, but a fundamental language of social position, perhaps even of lineage or marital status. The treasure of her tomb extended beyond her fingers. Around her neck lay necklaces of amber beads, their warm, honeyed color a stark contrast to the cool silver. This material is the second key to unlocking her story. Amber does not occur naturally in southern Spain. The nearest sources are hundreds of miles to the north in the Baltic region, or possibly from Sicily. For this amber to reach Castulo, it had to travel along vast, well-established trade networks that connected the Iberian interior to the coasts, and from there to the wider Mediterranean and Atlantic worlds. Someone, whether this woman or her family, had the means and the connections to acquire this exotic luxury. It was a symbol of reach, of a life connected to distant shores and far-flung commerce. Beside her rested more humble, yet equally telling objects. There was pottery, the everyday wear of the Iberian people, grounding her in her local culture, and there was a small cosmetic grinder, a mortarium. This simple stone tool, used to crush pigments for makeup or ointments, is perhaps the most humanizing artifact of all. It speaks of daily ritual, of preparation, of the care one takes for one's appearance in a social world. Together, these objects paint a nuanced portrait. She was not a queen buried with a golden scepter, but a woman of high standing within her community. Her wealth was worn, not stored. Her status was communicated through materials that spoke of both local identity and cosmopolitan access, the local silver, the distant amber, the personal grooming tool. The Tomb of the Silver Hands provides a quiet counterpoint to the grand hordes of warrior kings. It shifts our focus from the politics of the throne room to the social dynamics of the home. It suggests that in Iberian society, women could hold significant economic and social capital, expressed through control over exotic goods and a sophisticated culture of personal presentation. Her silent, ringed hands remind us that treasure is not always about monumental value, but about the profound meaning we embed in the objects we choose to keep close, even as we take our final journey. The soft silver of a lady's rings reflects a personal legacy, but our final treasure reveals an entire community's shared dream of divinity, painted in gold on a desert scale. In 1996, a donkey pulling a cart near Egypt's Bahariya. Oasis stumbled, its leg crashing through the crust of the earth. The driver peered into the hole and saw not darkness, but a flash of gold staring back. Archaeologists rushed to the site, and what they began to uncover was not a single tomb, but an entire city of the dead, an acropolis so vast it has been called the Valley of the Golden Mummies. This was a cemetery from the Greco-Roman period, dating from about the 1st to the 3rd century after the Common Era, a time when Egypt was a wealthy province of the Roman Empire. The scale was staggering, with estimates suggesting over 10,000 mummies may lie buried there, and hundreds have been excavated, each one a testament to a profound shift in who could afford eternity. The visual effect is breathtaking. These are not the royal mummies of pharaohs, but the remains of a prosperous middle class, provincial administrators, wealthy farmers, and merchants. Yet they were sent into the afterlife with a stunning innovation. Instead of the intricate painted cartonnage masks of earlier periods, these individuals were covered in a layer of plaster molded to their linen wrappings, and upon this plaster canvas, the embalmers applied a wash of brilliant gold leaf. The mummies seemed to glow with an inner light, their faces serene and idealized, staring upward with calm, gilded eyes. Many have entire chest plates of gold, decorated with intricate scenes of Egyptian gods. You might see Anubis, the jackal-headed god of mummification, tending to the deceased, or the goddess Isis spreading her protective wings. The iconography is purely Egyptian, a continuous thread of belief stretching back millennia. But the style tells a different, fascinating story. The faces are not the stylized portraits of pharaonic art. They show the clear influence of Greco-Roman realism. The features are individualized, with delicate brush strokes suggesting hair, blush on the cheeks, and lifelike expressions. This is the art of the Fayum portraits, those hauntingly realistic paintings on wood panels, translated into gold and plaster. It is a perfect fusion, where the Egyptian soul demanded traditional gods and the magical preservations of gold, while the Romanized citizen desired a portrait that looked like them, that preserved their personal identity. This cemetery is the democratization of immortality. In the age of the pharaohs, such lavish gilding was the exclusive right of the god-king. Here in Roman Egypt, a thriving olive oil and wine trade had created a broad class of people with enough wealth to commission their own apotheosis in gold. They could not afford a pyramid, but they could afford to become golden in death, to have their mortal shell transformed into a radiant, divine vessel. The Bahariya oasis was a flourishing hub on the desert trade routes, and its people invested their profits not just in villas, but in securing their forever. The golden masks were not vanity, they were a deeply serious spiritual technology. The gold represented the flesh of the gods, specifically the sun god Ra, whose skin was believed to be gold. By coating the body in this divine metal, the deceased was transformed, becoming an eternal, luminous being, an Ak, ready to join the cosmic cycle. The sheer number of these gilded mummies speaks to a collective aspiration, a widespread cultural conviction that through this affordable alchemy, the average person could achieve a state once reserved for royalty. They bridge two worlds, these golden mummies, standing at the intersection of an ancient Egyptian past and a globalized Roman present, proving that the deepest human desire is not merely to be remembered, but to shine. From golden masks to silent terracotta armies, from jade suits of immortality to sunken skulls whispering of 8,000-year-old rituals, these 35 treasures reveal a truth far greater than their material worth. They are not merely objects buried with the dead, they are conversations with eternity. Each one, whether a delicate gold foil pressed into a post hole or a mountain of bronze shaped into alien faces, was a deliberate message. A message about power, yes, but also about love for beauty, fear of the unknown, and a desperate, universal hope that something of our essence could endure. Ancient cemeteries are the ultimate time capsules. They preserve in stunning detail the social structures that ordered life, the artistry that defined culture, and the profound, often beautiful, beliefs that gave meaning to existence. They hold the blueprints of civilizations, waiting in the quiet earth to be rediscovered. So the next time you pass an old burial ground, a grassy tumulus, or a weathered headstone, see it with new eyes. Look beyond the silence and imagine the stories sleeping there, the incredible artistry, the complex beliefs, and the very human dreams that were laid to rest. Which of these hidden treasures spoke to you the most? Was it the cosmic mystery of Sanchengdui's bronze trees, the intimate portrait of the Ivory Lady, or the democratic gold of Baharia's mummies? Let us know in the comments below, and if you enjoyed this journey through history's greatest secrets, be sure to subscribe. Our exploration of the world's deepest historical mysteries has only just begun. But these treasures do not simply rest in museums as neutral facts of history. Every gold mask, every jade suit, every gilded mummy carries with it a profound and modern question, one that archaeologists, governments, and the public grapple with today. Who do these ancient treasures truly belong to? The moment an artifact is lifted from the earth, it enters a complex ethical landscape far removed from its original sacred purpose. Consider the very act of excavation. Is it always right to dig? The principle of preservation in situ argues that leaving a site undisturbed is the ultimate form of respect, protecting not just the objects, but their precise context, the arrangement of bones, the soil layers, the pollen grains, that tells the fuller story. Future technologies may reveal secrets we cannot currently detect. Yet, the counter-argument is powerful. Without excavation, sites are left vulnerable to far less careful hands. Looters, driven by the black market, will destroy context entirely to grab saleable artifacts, erasing history for profit. Natural erosion, climate change, and urban expansion also claim sites every year. Is careful, scientific excavation not a form of rescue, a way to preserve knowledge before it is lost forever? This dilemma has no easy answer, but it forces us to see these sites not as mines for museum exhibits, but as fragile, non-renewable pages of the human story. Beyond the dig, the journey of an object raises even thornier issues of cultural patrimony. When a treasure is displayed thousands of miles from its place of origin, who is its rightful guardian? The debate often centers on artifacts taken during eras of colonialism or under unequal power dynamics. The Parthenon marbles, removed from Athens by Lord Elgin in the early 19th century and now in the British Museum, are perhaps the most famous flashpoint. Greece argues they are an inseparable part of its national heritage and the architectural integrity of the Acropolis. The British Museum maintains they were acquired legally and are preserved and displayed for a global audience, protected from the pollution and political turmoil that have affected Athens. Similarly, Egypt has repeatedly requested the return of the bust of Nefertiti from Berlin's Neues Museum, calling it a cultural icon. Germany states it is a masterpiece of world art, acquired through a proper division of fines. These are not simple disputes over property law. They are conversations about identity, healing historical wounds, and the very soul of a culture. Is a masterpiece of ancient Egyptian art more profoundly understood in Cairo, surrounded by the context of its civilization, or in London or New York, where it can be seen as part of a broader narrative of human artistry? There is validity in both perspectives, which is what makes the issue so deeply felt. This leads us to the role of the modern museum itself. For centuries, museums in Europe and America positioned themselves as universal encyclopedias, the rightful stewards of global heritage. They argued that by bringing the world's treasures under one roof, they provided education, ensured conservation, and fostered a shared sense of human achievement. And there is truth to this. Many objects have been preserved in climate-controlled cases that their countries of origin could not have provided at the time of their removal. They are seen by millions who might never travel to their source. Yet, the voice of the source community is increasingly essential. A museum label written by a distant curator cannot convey the same living meaning as the story told by a descendant. Repatriation is not just about returning objects. It is about restoring voice, authority, and the right for a culture to interpret its own past. We are witnessing a slow but significant shift. Some museums are now engaging in long-term loans, collaborative exhibitions curated with source communities, and in some cases, the voluntary return of sacred or funerary objects. The ideal is evolving from a single, centralized archive to a networked, respectful dialogue. So, where does this leave us, as viewers captivated by these hidden treasures? The ethical dilemma has no single, clean solution, but it asks us to be more thoughtful witnesses. When we stand before a golden mask in a glass case, we can appreciate its beauty while also holding space for the difficult questions. We can ask about its journey. We can consider the living culture that claims it as an ancestor. We can support museums that prioritize ethical sourcing and collaborative storytelling. The treasures of ancient cemeteries were never meant to be passive displays. They were active participants in the beliefs of their people. Perhaps their final purpose in our modern world is to remain active, not as silent artifacts, but as catalysts for a deeper conversation about memory, respect, and our shared responsibility to the past. They challenge us to look beyond the dazzle of gold and see the human connections, both ancient and modern, that give these objects their true